Talofa lava, warm Pacific greetings and welcome to another episode of Pacifically Correct. Today I'm going to tackle a topic that I think is really important, and it's the topic of pornography. Now, Pacifica are so used to storytelling and listening to stories. That's how we've passed on our history generation to generation by word of mouth. So sit back, relax and enjoy a little story. When I was about 13 years old, I went to a friend's house after school and he pulled out his stepfather's pornography magazines. And the three of us sat around and we were having a bit of a nosy, and something changed in me that particular day. I'm watching, I'm looking, and in my mind, something shifts. I had no idea about women's bodies or how they thought, and as I started to read these things and look at these pictures, something was planted in my mind, which to this very day I regret. Now, it's important to understand that back in the 70s, pornography was only books. However, the damage was done. When you watch something, when you listen to something, it's there forever. You actually can't get rid of it. So what I'd like you to do now is just race forward a few years, and I get married at the age of 25. Now, that's when something really happened, because in my fantasy mind, I had all of these ideas of what sex was all about. And then it came to a rude halt when my new wife said to me, no, that's not reality, that's all fantasy stuff. Now, that in itself caused some issues between my wife and I, because I had been looking forward so long to all these weird and wonderful things that I'd read about, but it wasn't reality. So like I said, it created some issues, but I managed to get over it. So remembering that these thoughts were always in my mind, I then had to now introduce self-control. Go another 15 years from that date, and now pornography is on internet. And one day a friend of mine said to me, Nick, I've got a spare laptop, would you like to borrow it? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And back then it was the bee's knees. Well, on this laptop, these emails kept coming through from Hotmail. Would you like to see teenagers having sex? And of course I could sort of say, no, not interested. Then one particular day, this day I still regret, I just said, well, what's it all about? You know, what's the big fuss? I pushed the button and all of a sudden all these screens started loading up on my email. And it took me to all the different sites that were there, and I'm thinking, oh, how do I stop this? How do I stop this? But I don't know how it worked, but it was spring-loaded, and I ended up going to these different sites. Now, part of me was intrigued, thinking, I'm going to do a little bit of research here. And, you know, to my shame, some of my research took a couple of months. Now, I was watching what these people were on about. Now, the thing about it is you had to actually have a credit card to go in and buy. And, you know, by God's grace, I had no credit card. So I only got to see through the shop window stuff, but enough to understand that stuff was really bad. Bad in the fact that with the magazines that I had before, this had transformed into something where violence was part of, sex, and there was all sorts of evil stuff that was going on. So I thought to myself, nah, I don't really want to go there. But it came to an abrupt end when my friend wanted his laptop back. So I gave the laptop back, and one day he gives me a ring, says, Nick, can we talk? I pop in to see him. He was giving the laptop to a pastor. The pastor was having trouble with the software, so they went in there and there was this track of all these different sites that I'd been to, and it was one of those please explains. Well, I had to say, look, I'm really sorry. It was curiosity, that killed the cat. But having said that, I decided that was the last time I was ever going to even dream of going down that road. So for a couple of years, it was all good. Until one day, the pastor mentioned it to my pastor that a couple of years ago, Nick had the laptop and this is what happened. So I got pulled in by the pastor, and he said to me, Nick, I've learned something about your past. And I said, yep, I've been there, done that, but it's beside, I'm all over it at this point. And he says, now, how did your wife react to it all? And I went, my wife? I didn't actually tell my wife, because that's one of the things about pornography, it's very secretive. And so he says, well, let's call her in. So now my poor wife is sitting in the pastor's office listening to how her stupid husband had gone onto this laptop a couple of years ago. But the thing about it was, all credit to the pastor, he put me through a series of stuff. He gave me a book and says, Nick, I know you've dealt with it, but here's some stuff to stop you from going back. So having done that, I thought it was really good. I went on to do a men's program called Valiant Man with a guy by the name of Alan Meyer. And that helped me just sort of try and get rid of some of that stuff that was stuck in the back of my mind. Now, why do I share this with you, Pacifica? I share this with you for two reasons. One, if you're a young person watching this or you're a parent of young people, make sure they don't go there. It actually creates all sorts of issues that you're going to have to deal with later if you get married or with your future partner. Secondly, if you're already an adult that's watching this stuff, then you need to stop, because this sort of stuff is all based on fantasy. And at the end of the day, your understanding of what women's needs are and your understanding of how women should be treated is all corrupted. And to be honest, if you don't address it, it's going to tarnish you. It's going to actually blur the way you see women in the future. Now, two things I want to finish with. One is that our women, we need to look at them as sisters, all right, unless you're married to them. And secondly, it's really important to understand too that we have to be taken away from all this sort of stuff. I want to share a quick scripture. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11 says this: have nothing to do with the fruits of that darkness, but instead expose it. And that's why I'm bringing it to you today. Team, I'm exposing the fact that pornography is bad. It's against our biblical beliefs, and somehow if you got caught up in it, it's really important to try and break it, okay? Having said that, thank you for spending time with me. Let's keep it Pacifically Correct. Ka whatailava, pass you forward.